Which fundamental right was deleted from Part 3 by the 44th Constitutional Amendment 1978? The Constitution 44th Amendment Act 1978 deleted Article 19(1)(f) and Article 31, removing the right to property from Part 3 and relocating it as a mere constitutional legal right under Article 300A. Right to property. Which BNSS provision permits investigation by police without an order of a magistrate in cognizable cases? Section 175. Section 175 of the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023 carries forward the substance of Section 156 CRPC, empowering a police officer to investigate any cognizable case within his jurisdiction without an order from magistrate. Inherent powers of civil courts under the CPC are preserved by which section? Section 151 of the CPC saves the inherent powers of the civil court to make such orders as may be necessary for the ends of justice or to prevent abuse of the process of the court. Under Article 356, President's rule in a state may initially be imposed for a maximum period of 6 months. B is the correct choice. Article 356(4) provides that a proclamation of President's rule after parliamentary approval remains in force for 6 months at a time, extendable up to a maximum of 3 years on prescribed conditions. B is the right choice. Trial in absentia of a proclaimed offender is now expressly enabled under which BNSS provision? Section 356. D is the correct choice. Section 356 of the BNSS 2023 is a new provision that expressly permits trial in absentia of a proclaimed offender who has absconded and there is no immediate prospect of arresting him. A temporary injunction may be granted by a civil court under which provision of the CPC? Order 39, Rule 1 and 2 of the CPC empower the civil court to grant temporary injunctions to preserve property in dispute or to restrain a party from causing injury pending the suit. B is the right choice. The power of judicial review of legislation flows primarily from which articles? Judicial review of legislation is grounded in Article 13. Laws inconsistent with fundamental rights are void. Read with the writ jurisdictions under Article 32, Supreme Court, and 226, High Courts. D is the correct choice. BNS Section 304 introduces a distinct offence relating to which act? Section 304 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 carves out snatching as a distinct, newly codified offence with its own punishment, separate from theft and robbery. So B is the right choice, snatching. Under BNSS 2023, electronic mode of summons service is permitted under which provision? Section 63 of the BNSS 2023 modernizes the law on service of summons by expressly permitting service in electronic form, including through encrypted electronic communication subject to prescribed authentication. Section 63, choice D is the correct choice. Under Section 100 of the CPC, a second appeal to the High Court lies on which ground? Section 100 of the CPC permits a second appeal to the High Court only where the case involves a substantial question of law which must be formulated by the court at the time of admission. C is the correct choice. Substantial question of law. Confessions caused by inducement, threat, or promise are inadmissible under which BSA section? Section 22 of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023 reproduces the substance of Section 24 of the Old Evidence Act, rendering inadmissible any confession caused by inducement, threat, or promise from a person in authority. Under the Muslim Personal Law, Sharia, Application Act 1937, Talaq-e-Biddat, instant triple talaq, is now void and a punishable offence. Following the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Marriage Act 2019 and Shaira Bano versus Union of India 2017, instant triple talaq, talaq-e-biddat, is void and pronouncing it is a cognizable, punishable offence. Dishonor of check for insufficiency of funds is an offence under which section of the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881? Section 138 of the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881 specifically criminalizes dishonor of a check for insufficiency of funds or because it exceeds the amount arranged to be paid, treating it as a quasi-criminal offence. The President of India is elected by an electoral college consisting of which members? Article 54, the President of India is elected by an electoral college consisting of the elected members of both houses of parliament and the elected members of the legislative assemblies of the states, including the NCT of Delhi and Puducherry. D is the right choice. Elected members of the parliament and state legislative assemblies. Which BNS section provides the framework for prosecuting organized crime as a substantive offence? Section 111. Section 111 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 introduces organized crime as a distinct substantive offense in general criminal law for the first time, drawing from state statutes such as MCOCA. Inherent powers of the High Court under the CRPC 1973 are exercised under which section? Section 482 of the CRPC 1973 saves the inherent powers of the High Court to make orders necessary to give effect to any order under the Code, to prevent abuse of process, or to secure the ends of justice. A. Section 482 is the correct choice. The doctrine of res judicata is codified under which section of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908? Section 11 of the CPC codifies the doctrine of res judicata, barring courts from trying any suit or issue that has already been heard and finally decided between the same parties by a competent court. B is the right choice. Under the BSA 2023, the concept of dying declaration is incorporated within which section? Section 26 of the BSA 2023 deals with statements by persons who cannot be called as witnesses. The clause A specifically covers dying declarations, mirroring section 32(1) of the Old Evidence Act. Section 26A D is the correct choice. Aarti and Rajesh, married for 2 years, filed for divorce by mutual consent. The minimum cooling off period prescribed is Section 13B(2) of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 prescribes a minimum cooling off period of 6 months and a maximum of 18 months between the first and the second motions for divorce by mutual consent. Though the Supreme Court has held this can be waived in fit cases. An agreement without consideration is under Section 25 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 void unless within statutory exceptions. Section 25 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 declares that an agreement without consideration is void, save for the statutory exceptions of natural love and affection, compensation for past voluntary services, and promise to pay a time-barred debt. Article 51A of the Constitution deals with which of the following? Article 51A, inserted by the 42nd Amendment in 1976, enumerates the fundamental duties of every citizen of India, which, though non-justiciable, serve as a moral and constitutional reminder. B. Fundamental duties is the correct choice. Under Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, the offence of murder is dealt with under which section? Section 103. Section 103 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 prescribes the punishment for the offence of murder, replicating the substance of Section 302 of the IPC 1860. D is the right choice. Section 103 of BNS. Under the CRPC 1973, which section dealt with the powers of magistrate to take cognizance of an offence? Section 190 of the CRPC 1973 enumerated the three modes by which a magistrate could take cognizance: upon a complaint, upon a police report, or upon his own knowledge or information. C. Section 190 is a correct choice. Order 7 of the CPC deals with which of the following? B. Plaint. Order 7 of the CPC contains the orders governing the form, particulars, return and rejection of a plaint, including the requirement to state the cause of action and jurisdictional facts. B. Plaint is the correct choice. Section 65B of the Indian Evidence Act 1872 dealt with which subject matter? Section 65B of the Indian Evidence Act 1872 was inserted by the IT Act 2000 to provide a statutory regime for the admissibility of electronic records, including the certification requirement clarified in Anwar P. and Arjun Panditrao Khotkar. B. Admissibility of electronic records. Under the Guardians and Wards Act 1890, the welfare of the minor is to be considered under which sections? Section 17. Section 17 of the Guardians and Wards Act 1890 directs the court in appointing or declaring a guardian to be guided solely by what appears in the circumstances to be for the welfare of the minor. So, Section 17, choice D is the correct choice. Lis pendens under the Transfer of Property Act 1882 is dealt with under Section 52 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 codifies the doctrine of lis pendens, restraining any party to a pending suit from transferring the property in dispute to the prejudice of the other party. Section 52, that is choice A, is the correct choice. Which schedule of the Constitution contains anti-defection provisions? The 10th schedule. Inserted by the 52nd Constitutional Amendment in 1985, contains the anti-defection provisions disqualifying legislators who defect from their political parties. So the 10th schedule, choice A, is the correct choice. Under BNS Section 113, the offence of terrorist act is punishable with which maximum sentence where it results in death? Section 113 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 codifies the offence of terrorist act and prescribes punishment of death or imprisonment for life where such an act results in the death of any person. Death or imprisonment for life. B. Anticipatory bail under the BNSS 2023 is provided under which section? Section 482 of the BNSS 2023 provides for grant of anticipatory bail by the High Court or Sessions Court to a person apprehending arrest, replacing Section 438 of the CRPC 1973. D is the correct choice. Reference to Lok Adalat, mediation, conciliation, and arbitration is enabled under which CPC provision? Section 89 of the CPC, inserted by the 1999 amendment, requires the court, where elements of a settlement exist, to refer the dispute to arbitration, conciliation, judicial settlement, including Lok Adalat, or mediation. So, A is the right choice. An accomplice is, under both the Evidence Act and BSA, a competent witness against an accused person. This is provided under which BSA section? Section 138 of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023, mirroring Section 133 of the Old Evidence Act, declares an accomplice a competent witness against the accused, and a conviction is not illegal merely because it proceeds on his uncorroborated testimony. Under the Hindu Succession Act 1956, as amended in 2005, a daughter's right in compulsory property is equal to that of a son by birth. Following the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005 and Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma, daughters have equal co-partnership rights as sons by birth in Hindu family property. The rule in Rylance versus Fletcher imposes liability that is best described as. The rule in Rylance and Fletcher 1868 imposes strict liability on the occupier of land for damage caused by escape of dangerous things brought onto land in the course of a non-natural use, subject to recognized exceptions. C is the correct choice. Strict liability of non-natural use of land. Under the Indian Contract Act 1872, a minors agreement is. In Mohori Bivi versus Dharmodas Ghosh 1903, the Privy Council held that a minors agreement is void ab initio because Section 11 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 confines contractual capacity to persons of the age of majority. Which article of the Constitution of India guarantees the right to constitutional remedies? Article 32, which Dr. Ambedkar called the heart and soul of the Constitution, guarantees the right to move the Supreme Court for enforcement of fundamental rights through writs. B is the correct choice. Article 32. Which section of BNSS 2023 defines and punishes the offence of cheating? Section 318 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 is a recodified provision dealing with cheating and dishonestly inducing delivery of property, replacing Section 420 of the IPC 1860. C is the correct choice. Section 318. A police officer arresting a person without warrant must, under Criminal Procedure Code, produce the arrestee before a magistrate within 24 hours, excluding journey times. Article 22(2) of the Constitution and Section 57 of the CRPC require that every person arrested without warrant be produced before the nearest magistrate within 24 hours of arrest, excluding time necessary for the journey. An appeal to the Supreme Court from a decree of the High Court is governed by which CPC section? Section 109 of the CPC, read with Article 132 to 134, governs appeals from decrees or orders of the High Court to the Supreme Court, supplementing the constitutional appellate jurisdiction. B is the correct choice. Section 109. Under the Indian Evidence Act 1872, the burden of proof generally lies on which party? Section 102 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872 and Section 106 BSA 2023 places the burden of proof on the party who would fail if no evidence were given on either side. B is the right choice. The party who would fail if no evidences were provided. Under the Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996, an arbitration agreement must be. Section 7(3) of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 expressly requires an arbitration agreement to be in writing, though it may be contained in a document signed by the parties, an exchange of letters or pleadings. So, in writing only, D is the correct choice. Divorce by mutual consent under Hindu Marriage Act 1955 is provided under which section? Section 13B of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955, inserted by the 1976 amendment, enables both spouses to seek divorce by mutual consent after living separately for 1 year. Section 13B, choice C is the correct choice. In which case did the Supreme Court relax the rule of locus standi to enable pill? In SP Gupta versus Union of India 1981, the judges transfer case, Justice Bhagavati relaxed the traditional rule of locus standi, allowing any person acting bona fide and having sufficient interest to maintain a pill for the enforcement of public rights. A is the correct choice. An advocate accepting a brief for a fee proportionate to the result of litigation is professional misconduct as Champati. Rule 20 of Part 6, Chapter 2 of the BCA rules prohibits an advocate from stipulating a fee contingent on the result of the litigation or sharing the proceeds of litigation. As such, Champatious arrangements amount to professional misconduct. The Employees Provident Fund Funds and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952 applies to establishments employing 20 or more persons. Mr. Kapoor purchases a defective washing machine for 35,000 rupees. The proper forum the proper forum of first instance is District Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission. Choice A. Under the Income Tax Act 1961, previous year is defined under which section? Section 3 of the Income Tax Act 1961 defines previous year as the financial year immediately preceding the assessment year, replacing the various definitions earlier in vogue. D is the correct choice. Under Section 138 of Negotiable Instruments Act, the payee must give notice of demand to the drawer within 30 days of dishonor. Under Proviso B to Section 138 of the NI Act, the payee or holder must give written notice of demand to the drawer within 30 days of receipt of information of dishonor from the bank. A money bill, as defined under Article 110, can be introduced only in which house? Lok Sabha. Article 110, read with Article 109, provides that a money bill, as certified by the Speaker, can be introduced only in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha has only recommendatory power. So C, Lok Sabha, is a correct choice. Which of the following is not one of the general exceptions recognized under Chapter 3 of the BNS 2023? Chapter 3 of the BNS 2023 enumerates general exceptions such as mistake of fact, act of a child, consent and private defense, adverse possessions. Is a property law concept under the Limitation Act. Under the BNSS 2023, registration of an FIR for a cognizable offence is governed by which section? Section 173 of the BNSS 2023 governs the registration of information relating to a cognizable offence, FIR, corresponding to Section 154 of the old CRPC 1973. So C is the correct choice. Order 21 of the CPC deals primarily with which subject? Order 21 of the CPC, the longest order in the code, lays down the elaborate procedure for execution of decrees and orders, including modes of execution, attachment, and sale. So this is all about execution of decrees. Choice A is the correct choice. Which provision of the BSA 2023 expressly recognizes electronic and digital records as primary evidence? Section 61 of the BSA 2023 expressly recognizes electronic and digital records as admissible evidence with the same legal effect as paper records, treating them as primary evidence. So, Section 61, choice C is the correct choice. Appointment of arbitrators by the Supreme Court or High Court is governed by Section 11 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 deals with the appointment of arbitrators by the Supreme Court in cases of international commercial arbitration or the High Court for domestic arbitration where parties fail to agree. Section 11 C is the correct choice. Maintenance to wife, children and parents is now provided under which BNSS section? Section 144 corresponding to old CRPC 125 carries forward the maintenance regime of Section 125 of the old CRPC, provides a summary secular remedy for wives, children and parents unable to maintain themselves. Public interest litigation in India primarily evolved through which constitutional provisions? PIL in India has been developed under Article 32 Supreme Court and Article 226 High Courts through liberalization of the rule of locus standi to permit any public-spirited citizen to approach the constitutional courts. D is the correct choice. Article 32 in the case of Supreme Court and 226 in the case of High Courts. The doctrine of legitimate expectation is best understood as the doctrine of legitimate expectation recognized in cases such as Union of India versus Hindustan Development Corporation operates as a facet of natural justice and fairness, protecting reasonable expectations of process arising from settled practice or express promise. Choice C is the correct choice. The disciplinary authority of the State Bar Council against an advocate on appeal lies before the Bar Council of India. Section 37 of the Advocates Act 1961 provides for an appeal to the Bar Council of India against any order passed by the disciplinary committee of a State Bar Council in matters of professional misconduct. D is the correct choice. The Industrial Disputes Act 1947 defines industry comprehensively after which landmark case? In Bangalore Water Supply versus A. Rajappa 1978, a 7-judge bench gave industry in Section 2J of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 an expansive triple test meaning covering schematic activity organized by cooperation of employer and employees for producing goods or services. Under the Motor Vehicles Act 1988, claims for compensation arising out of motor accidents are filed before Motor Accident Claims Tribunal. C is the correct answer. Section 165 of the Motor Vehicles Act 1988 establishes Motor Accidents Claims Tribunal, which have exclusive jurisdiction to adjudicate claims arising from motor accidents. So C is the correct choice. Under the Income Tax Act 1961, residential status of an SSC is determined under Section 6 of the Income Tax Act 1961 lays down the tests for determining the residential status of an individual, Hindu United Family, firm and company, which in turn governs the scope of taxable income. Section C. Section 6. Answer D. Specific performance of contracts is now generally available under the Specific Relief Act 1963 as a general rule with limited statutory exceptions after the 2018 amendment. D is the correct choice. A general rule with limited statutory exceptions after the 2018 amendment. In which case did the Supreme Court propound the basic structure doctrine? The basic structure doctrine was first propounded by a 13-judge bench in Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala 1973, which held that Parliament's amending power under Article 368 does not exceed to altering the basic structure of the Constitution. So D is the right choice. Under the IPC 1860, the general exception of private defense of body extends up to causing death under which section? Section 100 of the IPC 1860 enumerated the circumstances in which the right of private defense of body extends to causing the death of the assailant, such as reasonable apprehension of death or previous hurt. Section 100A. Under BNSS 2023, the period for filing a charge sheet in cases punishable up to 10 years is 60 days. Choice C is the correct choice. Section 193 of the BNSS 2023 requires that the investigation be completed and a final report filed within 60 days for offences punishable up to 10 years and within 90 days for graver offences. A suit of civil nature must be entertained by civil courts unless barred under which section of the CPC? Section 9 of the CPC mandates that civil courts shall have jurisdiction to try all suits of a civil nature unless their cognizance is expressly or impliedly barred by statute. Section 9, choice B is the correct choice. Under the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023, facts in issue are defined under which section? Section 2 of the BSA 2023 is the definition section that defines fact in issue, relevant, document, and other key terms used throughout the Adhinayam. Section 2, choice C is the correct choice. An application for setting aside an arbitral award is filed under which section of the 1996 Act? Section 34 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 sets out the limited grounds and procedure for challenging and setting aside a domestic arbitral award. The Special Marriage Act 1954 applies to. The Special Marriage Act 1954 is a secular statute that enables marriage between persons of any religion, caste, or nationality through a registered civil ceremony independent of personal laws. D is the correct choice. Visakha guidelines on workplace sexual harassment were issued by the Supreme Court under which article? Article 32. In Visakha versus State of Rajasthan, 1987, the Supreme Court, exercising its jurisdiction under Article 32, laid down binding guidelines for the prevention of sexual harassment of women at the workplace pending parliamentary legislation. The principles of natural justice principally include audi alterum partem and nemo judex in causa sua. The two cardinal principles of natural justice are audi alterum partem, here the other side, and nemo judex in causa sua, no one shall be a judge in his own cause, the latter being the rule against bias. Under the BCA rules, an advocate must not Rule 13 of Part 6, Chapter 2 of the BCA rules prohibits an advocate from accepting a brief in any matter in which he has reason to believe that he will be a witness, as it compromises professional independence. The doctrine of lifting the corporate veil allows a court to. Lifting the corporate veil is a judicial doctrine by which courts disregard a company's separate legal personality and attribute its acts and liabilities to its members, directors, or controllers in cases of fraud, sham, or evasion of law. So B is the correct choice. The polluter pays principle was formally recognized by the Supreme Court in which case? In Vellore Citizens Welfare Forum versus Union of India 1996, the Supreme Court formally incorporated the polluter pays and precautionary principles as part of the Indian environmental jurisprudence under Article 21, 47, 48A and 51A(g). Identity theft and cheating by personation using a computer resource are punishable under which IT Act sections? Section 66C and 66D of the IT Act 2000, inserted in 2008, punishes identity theft by fraudulent or dishonest use of another's electronic signature or unique identification feature, while Section 66D punishes cheating by personation using any communication device or computer resource. Strike and lockout in public utility services under the Industrial Disputes Act require notice of. Section 22 of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 prohibits strikes and lockouts in public utility services without giving the other side at least 7 days, but not more than 6 weeks prior notice. In which case did the Supreme Court of India formulate the rule of absolute liability? MC Mehta versus Union of India, popularly known as oleum gas leak. D is the right choice. Goods and services tax in India is levied under which constitutional article as amended? Article 246A, inserted by the 101st Constitutional Amendment 2016, is a special source of legislative power that empowers both Parliament and the state legislatures to levy goods and services tax. Under the Transfer of Property Act 1882, the doctrine of part performance is contained in Section 53A of the Transfer of Property Act 1882, embodies the doctrine of part performance, protecting a transferee in possession under a written but unregistered contract of transfer from being dispossessed by the transferor. Under the 2013 Land Acquisition Act, social impact assessment is mandatory under which chapter? Chapter 2 of the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition Act 2013 mandates a social impact assessment study before acquisition to evaluate consequences for affected families. The term of a patent in India under the Patents Act 1970 is Section 53 of the Patents Act 1970 provides that every patent granted in India shall be for a term of 20 years from the date of filing of the application in compliance with India's TRIPS obligations. A is the correct choice, 20 years from date of filing. Under Article 21, the right to life includes which of the following as held by the Supreme Court? In Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India 2017, a 9-judge bench unanimously held the right to privacy to be an intrinsic part of the right to life and personal liberty under Article 21. Right to privacy, B, is the correct choice. Ravi, intending to scare Mohan, fires in the air. The bullet ricochets and kills Mohan. Ravi is liable for where death is caused by a rash or negligent act not amounting to culpable homicide. Sections 106 of the BNS 2023 corresponds to Section 304A of IPC applies. Firing in the air carelessly resulting in death is the classic case of criminal negligence. Under BNSS 2023, summary trials may be conducted by which class of magistrate? Section 283 of the BNSS 2023 empowers any chief judicial magistrate or a magistrate of first class specifically empowered by the High Court to try certain offences summarily in line with the old Section 260 of CRPC. Stay of suit on the grounds of pendency of a previously instituted suit is governed by Section 10 of the CPC bars a court from proceeding with the trial of any suit in which the matter in issue is also directly or substantially in issue in a previously instituted suit before the same parties. Section 10. A is the correct choice. Under BSA 2023, the doctrine of res gestae is preserved under which section? B. Section 6 is the correct choice. Under the Legal Services Authorities Act 1987, the awards of a Lok Adalat are Section 21 of the Legal Services Authorities Act 1987 declares every award of a Lok Adalat to be deemed a decree of a civil court, final and binding on the parties with no appeal lying against it. Final and binding, deemed a civil court decree. Under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955, the minimum age for a valid marriage of a bride is 18 years. Section 5(3) of the HMA 1955 prescribes the minimum age of 18 years for the bride and 21 years for the bridegroom at the time of marriage. And which of the following is generally not entertainable as a pill? Personal service grievance of an individual employee. Choice C is the correct choice. Personal service grievance of an individual employee cannot be filed under PIL. A writ of certiorari is issued by a superior court to quash an order of an inferior tribunal acting without jurisdiction. Choice A is the correct choice. Quash an order of an inferior tribunal acting without jurisdiction. #91. Professional misconduct of an advocate is dealt with under which section of the Advocates Act 1961? Section 35 of the Advocates Act 1961 empowers the State Bar Council to take disciplinary action against an advocate found guilty of professional or other misconduct, with appeal lying to the Bar Council of India. C is the correct choice. Under the Companies Act 2013, the minimum number of directors required for a public company is 3. B is the right choice. The National Green Tribunal was established under which legislation? The National Green Tribunal was established under the National Green Tribunal Act 2010 for the effective and expeditious disposal of cases relating to environmental protection and conservation of forests. So, choice A is the correct choice. In which case did the Supreme Court strike down Section 66A of the Information Technology Act 2000? Shreya Shingal versus Union of India. In Shreya Shingal versus Union of India 2015, the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A of the IT Act 2000 and as unconstitutional for being vague, overboard, and violative of Article 19(1)(a). Under the Code on Wages 2019, the appropriate government is empowered to floor wages and minimum wages. Section 9 of the Code on Wages 2019 empowers the central government to fix a floor wage taking into account minimum living standards, and the appropriate government must fix minimum wages not below this floor. Under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, the pecuniary jurisdiction of the District Commission is up to 50 lakhs. Following the 2021 notification under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, the pecuniary jurisdiction of the District Commission was rationalized to consumer disputes where the value of goods or services paid does not exceed 50 lakhs. The GST Council is constituted under which article of the Constitution? Article 279A. Inserted by the 101st Constitutional Amendment 2016, constitutes the Goods and Services Tax Council as a federal body chaired by the Union Finance Minister to make recommendations on GST. Article 279A. Coercion, as defined under Section 15 of the Indian Contract Act 1872, includes committing or threatening any act forbidden by the Indian Penal Code. C is the correct choice. The Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition Act 2013 replaced which earlier statute? A. Land Acquisition Act 1894. The last question. Soham, owner of Fit Life, trademark for gym wear, finds a rival selling Fit Life tees. His remedy lies under A. Trademarks Act 1999, passing off and infringement is the right choice. Choice A is the correct